So after 28 years later became one of my more disappointing film experiences of last year, does this sequel carry on that disappointment, or did I walk out with my own bone temple? What is up, guys? Welcome to my review of 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. This is a direct sequel to last year's 28 Years Later and the middle chapter of a planned trilogy. I'm a massive fan of both 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. I was just like pretty much all of you, just chomping at the bit for whenever they were possibly going to go back to this franchise. And 28 Years Later was my #1 most anticipated film of last year. And ultimately, that film did leave me pretty disappointed. There was a lot of things that I liked about it. Overall, I was positive. I thought the cinematography was great. I thought there was a number of great performances, some really high emotional moments, especially in the third act. But tonally, it was all over the place, and there was so many creative decisions that just still on rewatch don't work for me at all. And because of that, my hype and excitement level for this sequel never really got that high. Of course, the January release date always leaves a really big question mark in your brain of whether they're trying to optimize for not a whole lot of competition or it's actually a movie they're not that proud or that confident in. And aside from really being curious on what Nia DaCosta was going to do to change maybe the tone or the look or the approach to this franchise, there wasn't a whole lot story-wise that we were left lingering on in the last film that I was that keen on following up. And starting off with the positives for 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, I'm happy to say that I enjoyed this film significantly more than the last one. And in a lot of ways, this is the movie that I was hoping the last one was going to be. Now, they are following up on and expanding on a lot of elements that were left lingering from 28 Years Later. Some I was interested in, some I was absolutely turned off to. And there's a number of things that I'm still going to be somewhat in limbo with until we get the third and final film in this trilogy to see how they land the plane on a lot of these concepts and ideas. But I found this movie to be a lot more focused, a lot more tighter executed as far as the themes, the stories, and the characters, and especially a lot more tonally consistent. Now, Alex Garland is the writer yet again. He was the one who wrote the original film. He teamed back up with Danny Boyle to do 28 Years Later last year, and I assume he's going to be the trilogy writer for all three of these films. So this really is his baby, it's his ideas, it's his characters and storyline. And I think watching 28 Years Later and then following it up with Bone Temple is maybe one of the best examples of how a director can fundamentally change what is on the page to match what their personal vision is. Now, I do think that Alex Garland's writing is a little bit sharper in this film. I feel like the characters are better written. There's a lot more consistent themes throughout that mirror the first film quite a bit and do evolve from that first film quite a bit. Some of the best scenes in this film are literally just two characters having a dialogue exchange, exchanging their ideologies, giving you a little bit of a peer inside of how they tick as a human being. But I have to lay a lion's share of the credit for why this movie works so much better for me at the feet of the director, Nia DaCosta. Now, she is a filmmaker that's been on my radar for a while. I have been very excited to see what she was going to do with this one because I took notice of her all the way back in Candyman, which is her second film. I've never seen her first film, but I thought visually and thematically, she did an amazing job with that movie. Do have some issues with how it wrapped up, but overall, I thought it was a great showcase of her potential talent as a filmmaker. And then she just continued to get raw deals. Everybody wanted to call that Jordan Peele's Candyman. Almost nobody was crediting her for the strengths of that film. And then she goes to work for Marvel Studios, which typically is this big career move that actually puts you under the spotlight and ramps up your career prospects. But because she was given The Marvels, a movie that was fated to not do so well because of the characters and certain things that were really out of her control, and ended up being a pretty big mess of a film that is either one of or maybe the only Marvel Studios film to actually not make a profit. They just totally threw her under the bus, even though it is completely evident, and she has not minced words whatsoever to say that that is absolutely a Kevin Feige film that is out of her control. So I was genuinely upset and a little afraid that a couple of those blunders was going to snuff out this woman's career when she had so much potential. And I'm glad that she did The Bone Temple because now it is indisputable that this woman is a force to be reckoned with. Today's video is sponsored by Huel. As some of you know, I made some huge strides towards all of my fitness and wellness goals back in 2025. Well, with 2026 now upon us, it's very important for me to do things to set myself up for success so I can continue to lose fat while maintaining my lean muscle mass. And prioritizing protein like that is sometimes a difficult goal to meet without constant meal prep or potentially ignoring other very essential foods and vitamins. Well, with Huel's Black Edition powder, I'm able to quickly and easily get in a 400-calorie meal that has 40 grams of protein per serving. You just add water and 2 scoops of the powder to a shaker and then shake to mix. Yeah, there's no cool way to do this. They even have pre-made ready-to-drink meals, which I often reach for during my long editing sessions. Huel's Black Edition powder comes in a variety of flavors like vanilla, chocolate, chocolate peanut butter, banana, and strawberry. And the best part is when all is said and done, each meal totals out to cost you about $2.65, which at most places nowadays will get you what? A napkin, straw, ketchup packet. And in the month of January, you can even get the high protein starter bundle, which includes 1 Black Edition pouch with 10 meals, 5 ready to drink Black Edition bottles, and a shaker. All 20% off if you use my code. This bundle is only available through the end of January and is expected to sell out, so be sure you act quickly and get some Huel in your life by clicking the link in the video description or scanning the QR code on screen and use code CODY20 to get 20% off the high protein starter kit. This deal is for new customers only. And thank you so much to Huel for sponsoring today's video. The way that she takes these characters and these themes and these ideas to evolve the lore and the world of 28 Days Later was so much better executed in this film for my own personal taste. The way that she visualizes everything, the way that she paces the film, the performances that she gets out of the actors, I think is even stronger than the last one. And most importantly, the way that she attacks a lot of these ideas that are very much carried over from 28 Years Later about the Jimmies and Dr. Kelsing and him trying to see if there's still humanity left in the infected out there, and talking about the dehumanization of everybody that is actually alive and not infected that is left out there. Who are the true monsters? Like all these themes that are pretty standard for zombie movies and were pretty prevalent in that original film, but have taken kind of a different spin with this new trilogy. It felt like she had much more of a focused approach to it. Mostly in the way that she takes the story and very much makes it a duality of these two characters, kind of exploring the same things but inverted, where you have Jack O'Connell, who is Sir Jimmy Crystal. He is like this big bad villain that was introduced at the very tail end of the last film. He's essentially a Satanist cult leader, and his entire motive is to take these surviving people, fill their heart with hate and fear, and basically make them look at him as a god, to where he's able to reshape whatever is left with humanity in his own image, and he is able to strip their own humanity away from them by making them do these horrific things, by making them watch and participate in these horrific things, and filling their hearts and their heads with this fear of if they do not bend the knee, things are going to be ultimately a lot worse for them. And so you have that side going on simultaneously with Ralph Fiennes' character of Dr. Kelsing, where he is yet again building this relationship with this alpha infected that he has named Samson, who on his surface seems like the furthest thing away from humanity. He is this big, huge, hulking monster that only sees rage and blood and murder. And he wants to try to see if there is some glimmer of humanity left in him. So you start to build this friendship, this very odd relationship between them. He starts to dive a little bit more into the science of what is going on with this rage virus. And so you have one side of the story about somebody trying to strip what is left of humanity, while somebody else is trying to brighten the light that might be left of humanity. And the last thing I'll say in relation to all of this and Nia DaCosta's vision for bringing what's on the page to life is the way that she executes the Jimmy's characters night and fucking day to what we got in 28 Years Later. I know some people dug that. Some people picked up a little bit more on some of the imagery with Jimmy Savile and stuff like that. All that's good and fine. But tonally, the last 2-3 minutes of that movie was like absolute whiplash. Like it felt like a completely different film. And I love the fact that there's actually been like interviews where people have asked that question of like, oh yeah, we saw the end of 28 Years Later. And we were like, oh, okay. So that's what Nia's film is going to be like. And she all but said, fuck no. Like she was being respectful. She's like, oh no, like that's something that only Danny can do. I wouldn't even dream of trying to approach something like that, that's tonally like that. But you can just read between the lines. She saw that and she went, yeah, no, we're going this direction. And all the better for it, because they're a very interesting group of characters, and they are very much like tension and fear-inducing characters with the way that they are used in this film, where at the end of the last film, I was like, what the fuck kind of joke is this? Go, go, Power Rangers! And both Ralph Fiennes and Jack O'Connell are absolutely the standouts here. Everybody does a good job across the board, but they are the ones that are really coming to play. Jack O'Connell is just amazing at playing these crazy villains. We just had Sinners last year, which is going to be a huge awards winner. He was great in that. I just watched Eden Lake for the first time about a week ago. A movie that I definitely don't have any desire to rewatch, but he's definitely a sinister, fucked up villain in that one too. And then here yet again, somebody who is charismatic, definitely just commands the stage when he is center on screen, but is very sinister without really having to do a whole lot. He's not a person of action. He's a person of getting everybody else to do his actions. And the way that he's able to twist this very odd on his surface character that has this very light obsession with Teletubbies, like an image from his past, the last little glimmer of what the real world used to be before it just was lost to this rage virus. And the way he's able to articulate all these twisted ideas from his childhood and his interpretation of religion to be his worldview that he is spewing out onto all these impressionable people that become his jimmies is terrifying. And then you got Ralph Fiennes, which he's in that category of actors like Leo DiCaprio and De Niro, where saying he gives a great performance is almost like not even saying anything, because of course he is. He's been doing it for decades at this point. But I really love his character. He's the one character of the previous film that I was most interested in, that I was most invested in, that I was definitely wanting to see more about what exactly was going on behind his eyes. And in this movie, I think that he really is the beating heart of the film, where, as I said, his relationship that he is developing with this infected character, it's some of the most interesting and certainly some of the most emotional stuff that we get out of this entire franchise. And he's a character that is so multi-layered, where he's very stoic and he's very matter of fact, as a doctor would be expected to be, but yet he's also very quirky and weird. You get some newer elements to that in this movie, like his taste in music and his dance elements that he brings in, where he's just kind of just being this free spirit, this wandering soul left in this soulless seeming world. So both of them, like if you thought they were good in the last film, they're fucking outstanding in this one. And if you're somebody that goes to these 28 Days Later films or just horror films in general because you like gore, you like violence, you like brutality, you're going to get plenty of it in this one. I think this is arguably the most violent of all of them. You have a sequence inside of a barn that is certainly one of the most disturbing sequences that we've gotten in this franchise, and one of the most gory that we have gotten. And it's the type of gore where it's really not glamorized in the sense of like, oh my God, there's blood and guts everywhere, zombie movies are awesome. It's violence and it's gore in a way where you get like these phantom pains. You're watching something so gruesome happen to somebody that you start to like feel what they are going through, even if you really don't want to. You also get some of the stuff carried over from the last one, like skulls and spines being ripped out, alphas doing what alphas do. So this is one that if you come for the carnage candy, you're going to eat good. There are some outstanding needle drops in this movie, one in particular, which I think the vast majority of people that walk away from this film are going to look at as the standout sequence of this movie, maybe even of the whole franchise, depending on your music taste. And yet again, to go back to giving full credit to Nia DaCosta, like that is an idea, a sequence that on paper really shouldn't work. Like, if you pitched me the idea of a sequence that happens in this movie just out loud without me having seen the film, I would immediately tell you that sounds like something that's so tonally off from the rest of this franchise, even with how bizarre the last one is. I think that's a terrible idea. But the way that she executes it, not only visually is incredible, and the way that Ralph Fiennes just totally owns it in the sequence is incredible, but it actually fits the movie very well, thematically and narratively. So one of those things where it's just like, fuck yes. Like, only so many filmmakers can have the balls and the creativity to do something so wild like that and pull it off. And the last thing that I will say is that this does function very well as a middle chapter film. A lot of times I do have a bit of pet peeve with these middle chapters of planned trilogies because they don't really succeed at standing on their own much. They don't really feel like we get the first act exposition that you kind of need for a nicely flowing story, because all of that was in the previous film. You just kind of get into all of the second act stuff. And then they typically leave way too much on the table to be answered later on, to be resolved later on. And so even if it's a good movie, they always feel a little bit incomplete. There's very few middle chapters that don't fall into that trap. And what this one succeeds on is that it really doesn't feel super beholden to the last film. Of course, they are following up characters and plot lines, so it would help your experience to watch the last film, but it's not like you're totally lost. It's not like there's this vital information from the last film that is bleeding into this one. This one kind of resets the stage in a certain way and tells its own story while leaving you off with some things that are just enough of a nugget to appetize you for what is possibly going to come in the third film. It doesn't leave on a cliffhanger. It doesn't leave you unresolved with all the character arcs and the story arcs that are started in the last film or in this film. It resolves its story, and it gives you just a taste of where we might go in the future, and I loved that. Now moving on to the mixed, and most of these really are mixed positive. They're kind of just thoughts that I have that are going to be lingering until we get the third film. So one of them is that I feel like one of the faults of this entire franchise is that visually it's very inconsistent with the look and the chosen style. Danny Boyle, the movies that he has directed, he very much deliberately chooses to have more of a film grain, to have a little bit of a different aesthetic to it. The first film, he was one of, if not the first film to use digital cameras, which is why it looks so poorly aged. And then in the last film, he used like these iPhone rigs. And so it kind of recreated the look of 28 Days Later a little bit, but in a way that's going to age much better. 28 Weeks Later, and then now Nia DaCosta's film, The Bone Temple, take a much more standard approach to the camera and to the way that it looks, where there's not a whole lot of grain, there's not a whole lot of stylistic visual there as far as how the film actually looks. It's like a standard movie, which if I was going to pick one, I would prefer that because I want the movies to age well visually. But I do think it's a little bit jarring to have such a different look every single time we see a 28 Days movie, especially in something like this that is a planned trilogy. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if Danny Boyle should mandate somewhat of a film grain look, or they should just get together and plan that out a little bit. But something that didn't bug me, but I noticed it and I'm like, yeah, that is a little bit of a weird thing in this franchise. Another thing that I'm not really sure how well it works for me until we possibly get this paid off in the third film or not. As I was saying, this film really does reset the stage and doesn't feel super beholden to the last film. And with that, there are lingering plot threads that feel like they are pretty much abandoned. Like you don't have Aaron Taylor Johnson addressed at all in this movie as Spike's father. You don't have the zombie baby that they found in the back half of the last film addressed at all in this movie. They don't have a place in the story, so it's not like there's this glaring omission of, well, what the fuck? That feels like a big misstep. But for being a planned trilogy, I just don't know if they're punting that to the third film. I don't know if that's something that they've just since abandoned because people didn't respond the way they wanted to it. But it did feel like this lingering omission that I wish they would have at least addressed, even in a line of dialogue. Like the baby's one thing, but for Aaron Taylor Johnson, especially at the end of the last film, to be just so driven to go and find and save his son, I have a hard time believing that he wouldn't be out there somewhere trying to reconnect with Spike. So I don't know how I feel about that yet. And the last thing that I'll say in the mixed, this is a very good version of this type of zombie film, but it does fall a little bit into what I would call growing tropes of the genre. And that's that this is a story about how humans can be more evil than the monsters themselves. You know, this is a film that really isn't focused narratively on the infected. It's not about people trying to escape from the infected or trying to survive from the infected. They're background threats. And they play more of a narrative place in the Ray Fiennes side of the storyline, obviously, with the Alpha and everything. But this is a movie about the Jimmy cult and Spike's placement in that and his growing danger being around these people alongside Ray Fiennes. And then eventually those stories converge. And so it's a very interesting, unique take on that template. But we have had multitudes of zombie movies and zombie TV shows, looking at you, The Walking Dead, that tend to focus a lot more now on, well, I know there's flesh-eating, brain-eating zombies walking around, but actually the humans are the more fucked up ones. So there's a certain element to this movie that might feel a little bit tired or familiar to people that watch a lot of zombie media. And now moving on to the negatives. And my first one here is a very small negative. I actually debated on putting it in the mixed column for whatever that is worth. So this is a film that does rely a bit on jump scares. They're well-crafted jump scares. They're not fake outs, so none of the cheap shit, but that's predominantly where you're getting a lot of your scare factor factor in the Bone Temple is from an infected jumping out, or having a loud noise, or having something flash in front of the screen that you weren't expecting. People have different levels of tolerances and appreciation for that, but just something to note, you're not going to get a whole lot beyond jump scares in this movie if you're going to be freaked out or on the edge of your seat. And then my other big issues with this film all surround the character of Spike. Now, I thought the character was fine in the first film. I liked the coming of age element. I was invested emotionally in the stuff going on with his mom. It really did feel like this, growth into manhood type storyline, which I can really get invested in. And when he kind of goes off on his own to uncertain fate by the end of the last film and then met the Jimmies, and now we're picking up on that plot thread. I felt like this second film had a big opportunity that they totally missed here, which is to really advance his character as far as growing into manhood. He's a character that the Spike that we meet at the beginning of this film is really the Spike that we have at the end of the film. There's not really a whole lot of growth that I felt in the character. He's a very scared and naive kid who's in over his head, who is in a situation that is horrifying for even an adult, so all the more tense for him. He's surrounded by really evil, fucked up people, and it just gets more and more dangerous of a situation for him. And without saying too much, it felt like a very clear and easy setup to do a really nice character arc with him that paid off well by the third act, and seeing how he has changed from Act 1 to Act 3. And it just didn't feel like they did that. I don't know if they're saving that for later on, because he is very much our through line character for this trilogy. We're going to get more of him, but I just didn't really feel like they did anything with him. Like, you get Jack O'Connell, you get Ray Fiennes that are absolutely the focus here. They are the two leads of the movie, make no mistake about it. But Spike, as our through line character, still should have felt like he's advanced or changed some in this middle chapter of his overarching story. I didn't feel like he did. Even to the point where I would almost say the movie gives him a little bit of plot armor that I didn't quite buy. It was the one thing in the movie that I kind of bumped up against the logic of, where at the very beginning of the film, it is made extremely clear to you that Jack O'Connell's character holds this group together with an iron fist. They do whatever he says, and he will push them and order them and force them to do the most vile and disgusting and depraved things. He has no patience for any hesitance on their part, and certainly none for any insubordination on their part. And yet he does both of those throughout almost the entire film when it comes to Spike. There's situations where I don't believe that Jack O'Connell's character would not do more to push Spike, to not force Spike into doing certain things, or at least participating in certain things. Again, I'm kind of jumping around details because I don't want to get spoilerific, but there's a couple of different sequences here where the Jimmies are a very big focus of, and all the while it feels like Spike isn't held to the same rules as everybody else, and I never really believed that would happen. It just felt like convenience for the fact of keeping that character around for the story that they're trying to tell. All in all, guys, I really enjoyed this movie. I think that for most people, it's easily going to be the second best of the franchise. I'm actually a lot higher on 28 Weeks Later than the vast majority of people, so for me, it's a little bit more of a debate, but I like this way more than the last one. It fixed a lot of my issues from the last one. It sets me up in a place where I'm not only satisfied with these new story and character directions, but I'm also excited for the future. And I'm also excited for the future of what Nia DaCosta might bring, whether it's more horror films or not, because if anything is accomplished by the end of this film, it's showing you that she is one hell of a filmmaker that I can't wait to see what she does next. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for a playlist of all of my end of the year videos wrapping up 2025 films. And I'm also going to put my review of 28 Years Later up here if you just want to stick with this franchise. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.